Before falling into slavery, Kai had lived in a village that people in other lands would speak of, either as a legend or as madness. It was called Ard. Ard stood far from the great cities among stone hills and dry ravines, where the wind cut away sound, and the grass grew sparse and tough. Merchants did not come there without reason, the weak did not settle there, cowards did not linger there. People lived there who knew one thing from childhood. If you want to survive, become stronger than nature and stronger than the person beside you. Their elders were more terrifying than young warriors anywhere else. In Ard, they said that the blood of a legendary warrior of ancient times still flowed in some families, and those in whom it awakened must not forget their origin. That was why children there were not coddled. They were taught to strike, endure, fall, rise, and if necessary, kill. Kai was the last of that line. Not the most beloved, not the loudest, but the last. When he was 7, he saw an old man with a crooked cane break the horn of an enraged mountain goat with a single strike of his finger. He did not even kill it, he simply showed that he could. When Kai was 10, his mother broke a wooden table with one palm because Kai had complained about pain after training. When he was 13, he lifted onto his shoulders for the first time a stone that 4 men carried in pairs. And no one in Ard told him, "You are strong." There they said, "Still not enough." He grew up on that. And that was why when he was captured one day, at first he did not understand who exactly had defeated him. Kai left Ard with a hunting group for 3 days. It was an ordinary trip into the stone valleys for salt and ore. Nothing unusual. 6 men, 2 women, 1 teenager. Everyone had simple weapons with them. Kai had a heavy staff of hard wood with a metal tip. In Ard, that was already considered almost children's equipment. But in the world beyond the village, it would have been a deadly weapon in the hands of any ordinary person. They were walking along the old path when they were attacked. Not people from the neighboring valley, not bandits, and certainly not ordinary robbers. They were mages. Kai understood that immediately, even before he saw the first sign in the air. First came the smell of ozone. Then the ground under his feet trembled. Then a blue flash burst out of the stones, and one of the hunters fell, clutching his burned shoulder. Kai stepped back and raised his staff. "Ambush!" someone shouted. But it was too late. Magical chains flared in the air, thin, glowing threads that wrapped around 2 hunters at once. One tried to break free, but he was thrown against a stone. The second woman was struck in the chest by something invisible, and she collapsed without making a sound. Kai leaped forward. He did not know magic, but he knew how to break people. The staff struck the first attacker in the elbow so hard that the bone cracked. He met the second with a knee to the stomach and an elbow to the jaw. The third managed to raise his palm to release another wave of magic, but Kai was already too close. He crashed into him with his shoulder and knocked him off his feet. For a moment it seemed that he would win, but then the mage who stood farthest away simply said one word, and the air around Kai became heavy, as if a stone had been placed on his chest. He staggered, his whole body filled with lead, and at that moment something metallic struck him in the back from behind. The world tilted. Kai fell to his knees. The last thing he saw before his consciousness drifted away was the faces of the attackers. Not bandit faces, not dirty, expensive, confident. These were people who knew they were taking not prey, but merchandise. He woke up bound. On his neck was a heavy metal hoop, warm and unpleasant. Along the inner side ran a thin, silvery weave of runes. He tried to raise his hand and immediately felt a blow of pain, as if someone had squeezed a hook inside his head. Someone nearby groaned. Kai opened his eyes and saw a long wagon with bars along the sides. Dust, heat, people sitting on the floor in chains. Several men, 2 women, 1 boy. Some were wounded. One was no longer moving. "Awake?" someone nearby asked hoarsely. Kai turned his head. A gray-haired old man with a broken nose looked at him calmly as if he had already seen all this many times. "Where am I?" Kai asked. The old man smirked. "In a slave caravan, more precisely, on the way to the arena." Kai frowned. "Arena?" "The Colosseum," the old man said. "Or as they call it in the capital, the Great Bowl." Kai said nothing. The old man looked at the hoop on his neck. "Do not twitch. That is a suppressing collar. If there is magic in you, it muffles it. If you try to remove it by force, it will burn your nerve lines. If you try to rebel, the pain will be so strong that you will lose consciousness in a second." Kai slowly clenched his teeth. "Who did this?" "Those who buy people for the arena. Why?" The old man smirked again without joy. "Because the spectators like watching the weak die beautifully. And if the weak one does not die and also brings in money, he becomes a good investment." Kai was silent. He was not used to staying silent for long, but now he was silent. Because for the first time in his life, something very much like rage rose in his chest. Not fear, not confusion, exactly rage. And if someone had looked into his eyes then, they would have understood that this man was not broken yet. He did not see the capital right away. First the walls, then the towers, then a huge stone amphitheater, rising above the whole city like the maw of a monster. The Colosseum was visible from afar. Its walls were decorated with bas-reliefs of ancient battles, and people crowded at the entrances. Merchants, wealthy spectators, soldiers, mages, traders, officials. Everything here revolved around the arena. Fortunes were made on it, lives were ruined, legends were born. The caravan stopped at the lower gates. The slaves began to get out one by one. They were checked by mage overseers with rods. Each had a white cloak with a black stripe. They looked as if they were inspecting not people, but tools. When Kai's turn came, one of the overseers stopped. This one. Another looked at him more attentively. Too large. But without magic, someone nearby answered. It is easier to start with one like that. Kai did not understand what that meant, but an hour later he understood. They were brought into the underground rooms of the Colosseum, into a long row of stone cells where gladiators were kept before battle. Some were in chains, some sat calmly. Some trained even here despite the collars. Kai looked around the place and understood immediately. This was not just a prison. This was a factory of death. The warden, a tall man with a short beard, threw a piece of cloth, a bowl of water, and a metal tag onto the floor in front of him. Name? Kai. Not Kai anymore. Not yet. The man took the tag and read the record. Without clan, without home, without registered school. That means you will be recorded as 0. What does that mean? That you have nothing except your body. Kai clenched his teeth. The warden smirked. On the arena, that is exactly what is needed. He turned to the others and ordered, "Chain on the neck, Sector 3. And that was when Kai saw them. The gladiators' chains. They were not ordinary. At first glance, a heavy metal collar and a short segment of chain descending to a ring at the collarbone. But runes were carved on every link. When a slave began to get too angry or tried to gather magic, the chain glowed dimly and tightened around the throat. If he tried to escape, the runes responded with pain in the spine. If he tried to lie to an overseer, the chain became cold as ice and took away his breath. They were called the chains of submission. Slaves were told they were needed for order. Gladiators knew the truth. They were needed so that no one became free before the fight. Kai ran his fingers over his collar. The metal was smooth, heavy, cold, and hateful. At that moment, he understood one thing. If he survived, he would break this. In the cell where he was sent, 3 were already sitting. The first was a thin guy with a tattoo around his eye. He looked at everyone with the smile of a man who had long stopped believing in a good ending. His name was Rem. The second was a woman of about 30 with short white hair and a scar on her neck. She did not smile at all. Her name was Sora. The third was a silent old man with heavy hands and calm eyes. His name was Braun. They looked at Kai as at a new problem. Rem was the first to break the silence. "Well then, fresh one?" Kai nodded. "Yes, from where?" "From a village." Sora smirked. "Everyone says that. I really am from a village." Braun measured him with his gaze. "Which one?" Kai wanted to answer honestly, but he understood that if he said Ard, they would not believe him. Because people were not supposed to know about Ard. Villages like that are usually thought of as fairy tales. "From a mountain one," he said evasively. Rem grinned. "Then maybe you really know how to fight not in the capital way." Kai sat down on the floor and asked, "What is happening here?" Sora crossed her arms. "You were bought. That is what is happening." "No, I mean the arena." Braun answered instead of her. "There are 5 schools of combat on the arena. Every gladiator has his own style. Mages strike with elements, runes, blood, illusions, spiritual techniques. If you have no magic, you are meat. If your magic is weak, you are a spectacle. If it is strong, they keep you longer and feed you better." Kai listened carefully. "And how do people survive here?" Rem laughed quietly, in different ways. Someone prays, someone sucks up, someone learns to kill faster, someone breaks. Sora looked at him coldly, and someone stops being a slave inside, even if the chain is still on the neck for now. Kai shifted his gaze to her. She was not one of those who spoke much. Every word from her was like a blow. "Have you been here long?" he asked. 7 years. Kai fell silent. 7 years. On the arena. That was worse than he had expected. And yet none of them looked completely broken. He remembered that. Because such people were usually the ones who survived. The next day, they were led out into the inner courtyard. It was a stone circle under the open sky, where gladiators were trained before battles. Magical grates hung above it so that no one could escape. Overseers stood in the corners, and in the center was the instructor. The instructor's name was Varos. He was old, dry, with faded eyes and a voice that sounded like a rusty knife. Listen carefully. In this place, you are not fighters. You are a resource. Your task is to survive as long as the public allows. Whoever pleases the crowd eats. Whoever does not please, it disappears. He walked along the line of slaves and stopped in front of Kai. This one is new. Without a school? Without one, the overseer answered. Varos smirked. Excellent. Let us see what a body without magic does. In response, he was given a training block. It was a thick wooden post covered with leather and reinforced with resistance magic. Ordinary gladiators struck it to learn energy control. Kai looked at the block, then at Varos. Hit it, the instructor said. Kai struck. Not with magic, not with technique. Simply with his fist. The block cracked. For a second, the yard became silent. Then someone laughed. Then someone else. The overseer frowned. Varos stared at the cracked post for a long time. Again. Kai struck a second time. The block broke in half. Now no one was laughing. Sora, off to the side, narrowed her eyes slightly. Rem even whistled. Braun slowly raised an eyebrow. Varos came closer. What are you, body-enhanced? No, Kai answered. Then how? Kai shrugged. That is how we do it where I am from. Varos looked at him as if he had heard a bad joke. What kind of village could produce a body like that? Kai said nothing. Because he himself still did not fully understand how to explain to people that his childhood had not been a school, but a forge. The first fight was given 3 days later. It was a standard release of newcomers without spectators from the highest circle, but with enough people to determine value. Kai was placed against 2. One was a thin mage with stone needles. The second was a sturdy slave with fiery threads. The overseer smirked when he announced the pairs. The newcomer is lucky. He has 2 opponents at once. That makes it more interesting. Kai was silent. Inside him, everything was very calm. Not because he was not afraid, because fear worked differently in him. It did not bind him, it gathered him. Sora, passing by, stopped and said quietly, Do not think the arena is fair. I have already understood that. No, you have not. If you see that the fight is not in your favor, make it dirty. They do not punish for that here. They applaud for that here. Kai looked at her. Thank you. Do not thank me. Survive. Rem smiled from the neighboring cage. And do not die beautifully. That is also advice. Kai nodded. When the gates opened, the roar of the crowd struck his face like a wave. The Colosseum turned out to be enormous. Stone rows rose upward, filled with people. The rich above. The poor lower down, mages in separate boxes. Below was the sand of the arena, on which there were already stains of old blood. Kai stepped out into the light, the chain of submission on his neck. Iron restraints on his wrists. Silence in his chest. On the other side of the arena stood 2. The mage with stone needles was smiling too nervously. The second twirled thin, fiery threads with his fingers. The crowd was noisy. Bets were already being taken. People shouted. Someone laughed. Someone argued. The herald announced, Fight of the newcomer. Nameless. Against 2. Will he accept magic? Or will he fall under it like all the others? The crowd roared in anticipation. Kai looked at his opponents. They were looking at him too. And at that moment, when the countdown began, both raised their hands almost at the same time. Magic stirred in the air. Stone. Fire. Death. Kai clenched his fists. The chain on his neck trembled, sensing a surge of anger, but it was too late. Because Kai dashed forward. Not like a mage, not like a hero, not like a student, like a beast from the village of Aird. He deflected the first stone projectile with his forearm. The skin cracked. Blood appeared. But the arm did not break. He caught the second with his palm and squeezed it so hard that the magical needle crumbled into dust. The crowd made its first collective sound of surprise. The fiery threads struck through the air, trying to entangle his legs. Kai jumped over them, landed too heavily for an ordinary person, and in the next instant was already within striking distance. The stone mage exhaled a new wave, but Kai struck him in the chest so hard that he was thrown backward. He collapsed, coughing. The fire opponent shouted a spell, and a strip of flame flared up on the sand. Kai did not stop. He ran into the fire. The crowd gasped. The chain on his neck flared with pain, but he broke through it, clenching his teeth, and struck the second opponent in the stomach with his palm, with such force that he bent in half. Then with an elbow to the jaw, then with a knee to the chest. And all of it was so rough, so wild, and so physically impossible for an ordinary slave that people in the stands began to rise. The stone mage tried to get up, but Kai was already beside him and simply threw him onto the sand. Not with magic, with his hands. The second wanted to say something, but received a blow from an open palm to the face and fell unconscious. Silence came sharply. Then the entire Colosseum exploded. Not with cries of joy, not immediately. First with shock. Because the people had just seen a gladiator who had won not with magic, but with raw physical strength surpassing everything that was considered normal. The overseers exchanged glances. Varos from the side of the arena slowly frowned. And Sora, sitting in the preparation cage, smiled slightly for the first time in a long while. "Well now," she whispered. "Looks like the arena has a new beast." He was returned to the cell, not as usual. Too many eyes followed him. Too quickly they began discussing him. Who is he, without magic? Did you see how he walked through fire? That's impossible. Maybe he is from an old line? Come on. Kai sat in the corner and listened as his fight was already turning into a rumor. Sora was the first to approach when they were returned to the block. "Where are you really from?" Kai looked at her. "From Ard." She frowned. "Never heard of it." "I am not surprised." Rem squatted down beside him. "Do you know what you just did?" "Want a fight?" Rem smirked. "No, you broke a rule, and that is much worse." Braun, who had been silent until then, spoke with respect for the first time. "I have seen strong people, but all of them had one thing in common. They were either mages or trained by a school." He looked at Kai with a heavy gaze. "And you are as if you grew up somewhere where strength is not a talent, but everyday life." Kai remained silent. Because it was true. That evening, the warden came to him. "Varos wants to see you." Kai stood up. Sora said quietly, "Careful." Rem added, "The old man does not like it when people play outside his notes." Kai nodded and went. Varos sat in a small room above the arena. Through a narrow window, the evening light and part of the sand could be seen. He was not smiling. "Sit," he said. Kai sat. The instructor looked at him for a long time. "You are not trained in magic." "Yes, do you even understand what you are doing on the arena?" "Fighting." Varos nodded slowly. "That is the problem. You fight unlike everyone else. The spectators love that. But the owners do not always." Kai looked straight at him. "And what comes next?" Varos leaned back in his chair. "Next, you have a choice." Kai remained silent. "First option, you continue being a rare spectacle. They will throw you against mages, test your durability, raise the stakes. If you are lucky, you will live long. If not, you will break beautifully. The second? The second is that you work for us." Kai frowned. "For you? For the Colosseum. You will become a special fighter, not just a slave, but someone who can be sold as a legend. We will give you better food, training, a doctor, and a little freedom. In exchange, the fights we need." Kai understood immediately. This was not freedom. This was a bigger cage. I do not agree. Varus nodded as if he had expected exactly that. Then the third path. The worst one. Kai raised his gaze. "And what is it?" Varus looked at the chain on his neck. "A collar test. If we decide that you are dangerous, they will break you. Not kill you, break you so that you will never become a problem again." Kai was silent. The room became very quiet. And then Varus leaned forward. "But I want to understand one thing. Where does such strength in you come from?" Kai slowly raised his head. "From a home where the weak were not kept." Varus looked at him with new interest. "Interesting answer. That is not an answer, but it is close to the truth." Kai said nothing, because the truth was even stranger. And if he now told him about Ard, about the elders who broke stone with a finger, about women who could kill with a strike of the palm, about the legendary blood of an ancient warrior, he would either not be believed, or they would decide to use him. And that was already the most dangerous thing of all. At night, Kai did not sleep. He sat on the bunk and touched the collar. The metal was heavy, silent, dangerous. The chains of submission held slaves not only with force. They instilled the thought, you have no right to break free. And that was their most dangerous part. But Kai was not thinking about escape now. First, he needed to understand the system, understand the arena, understand the mages, understand who truly owned the Colosseum here, and most importantly, understand how all of it could be broken. Sora watched him from her corner. Not sleeping? No. Thinking about escape? Not yet. She smirked. Good answer. That means you are already smarter than half the newcomers. Kai looked at her. And you? I am thinking about how quickly they will notice you. They already have. Sora nodded. Yes, and that is both bad and good at the same time. Why? She looked straight at him. Because now they will either make you a star or try to break you before you become a threat. Kai nodded slowly. He already understood that, but he did not say aloud that for the first time in all his time in this place, he felt not only rage but also direction. He would not simply survive, he would rise, and then he would look into the eyes of those who had turned the arena into a circus of slaves. And when he did, they would understand that they had been mistaken about the most important thing. He had not come from an ordinary village. He had come from a place where strength was not a rarity, but blood. And that blood had only just begun to awaken. On the upper tier of the Colosseum, in a dark room behind a curtain, sat a man in a silver mask. An observer stood before him and spoke quickly. A newcomer with an empty magical channel defeated two. With raw strength, the crowd is in shock. People are already placing bets on the next fight. The silver mask did not move. What is his name? Kai. But in the lists, he is still 0. Silence. Then the man in the mask slowly raised his fingers and tapped them on the armrest. Watch him. Do not touch him, for now, as you command. When the observer left, the man in the mask stood and approached the window, beyond which the Colosseum burned with light. Below, in a stone cage, sat a new slave, and for now, no one understood what exactly had awakened in him. But this was only the beginning, and the chain on his neck had not even yet managed to understand whom exactly it was trying to hold. After Kai's first fight, they stopped considering him ordinary meat. That did not mean they began treating him well. In the Colosseum, noticed was not the same as respected. Here it was more dangerous. Because now they looked at him not as another slave, but as possible prophet, a threat, or a curious mistake. The cells became tighter from all the gazes. Newcomers whispered. Old gladiators watched closely. The overseers began checking his collar more often. Instructor Varus no longer pretended that Kai was just another savage. The next day, he was summoned for an additional examination. A mage healer in a gray robe moved a glowing needle over his shoulders, chest, and arms for a long time. He frowned more and more. Strange, he muttered. What is strange? The overseer asked. His body. 2 dense muscle fibers, 2 strong tendons, and the bones. They are as if they were tempered since childhood. The overseer looked at Kai. Village labor? The healer shook his head. No, this is not just labor. This is systematic training. From early childhood. And very harsh. Kai was silent. The healer frowned even harder. Where are you from? From a village. In which lands? Far away. The overseer exhaled. And the clan name? Kai looked straight ahead. I have no clan. The healer clearly did not believe him, but he did not argue. Because the main problem was not Kai's origin, it was that his body endured strain too well. For the Colosseum, that meant one thing. He could live longer than planned. And that was already unprofitable for those who liked quick deaths. 3 days later, Kai was transferred to the general training hall for the first time. There he saw those whom he had previously seen only from afar, the strongest gladiators of the Colosseum. Each had his own style, his own name, his own price. The most famous was Raven, an illusion mage who could make an opponent see 3 false arenas around himself at once. Then came Leia the Ashen, a girl with fire magic who fought so fiercely as if every fight were revenge. There was also Thunder, a massive man who strengthened his body with magical strikes and broke shields with his hands. And of course Terran the Voiceless, a gladiator who did not say a single word and used dark seals that stuck to the skin and drained strength. Kai looked at them attentively. They looked at him too. Raven was the first to speak. Is that him? Leia raised an eyebrow. That very 0? Thunder smirked, too big for a 0. Terran was silent. Varro stood by the wall and watched. Newcomer, he said. Today you work with level 6. Level 6 meant that experienced fighters came out against you, not for death, but for testing. Kai asked, and if I refuse? Varros looked at him as if the question were foolish. Then the caller will remind you who chooses here. Kai understood, and went. The first to come out against him was Thunder. In the training circle, magic was limited but not forbidden. They were testing what a body could do if half the strength was removed. Thunder smiled broadly and even a little friendly. Do not take offense, boy. I will not kill you. I will just break a couple of habits. In response, Kai only raised his fists. Sora, standing in the distant row, said quietly, He does not understand that this is a bad idea. Rem smirked beside her. Who do you mean? Thunder or Kai? Both. When the signal sounded, Thunder immediately rushed forward with body enhancement. His fist was wrapped in magical light. Kai did not dodge completely, took the blow on his forearm and stepped aside. Then he answered with a strike to the body. Thunder stepped back half a step. The crowd of gladiators began whispering. Thunder raised an eyebrow in surprise. Not bad. Kai did not give him a second moment. He stepped closer and struck the jaw from below upward. Thunder swayed. In response, he tried to knock him down with his shoulder, but Kai was already at his side and drove a knee into his ribs. The force of the blow was such that the shoulders of those standing nearby trembled. Thunder exhaled, smiled even wider, and finally engaged seriously. Now it was no longer an exchange, but a fight. Kai took hits but did not fall. Thunder strengthened his body. Kai answered with rough, dry, almost animal-like physicality, and that was exactly what stunned everyone, because Thunder was an experienced gladiator, and Kai fought him as if he did not know the word caution. In the end, Thunder did knock him down, but only after he himself had taken 3 hard hits and had already begun breathing more heavily. Varos raised his hand. Enough. Thunder offered Kai his palm. Are you really from a village? Kai stood up and silently shook his hand. Yes. Thunder smirked. Then you have very bad villages there. Or very good ones. Leia off to the side was the first to laugh. And then the others did too. In the evening, Sora sat opposite Kai in the cell where they had ended up together again. You lose only when you are already considered the winner, she said. Kai rubbed his neck. Do you always start a conversation like that? Yes, good. Then I will start too. What do you need? Sora looked at him evenly. To understand who you are. Why? Because you should not have survived the first fight so confidently. And you should not have fought Thunder like that. This is not just bodily strength, this is upbringing. Kai was silent. Sora continued, I have a good eye for people. I have seen slaves, mages, killers, nobles, fugitives, and the broken. You do not look broken. You look like someone who has not yet understood how big the world around him is. Kai smirked. You talk like an instructor. I could have been one if I had lived differently. He turned to her. So what do you want to know? Sora was silent for a little while. The village of Erd. I have never heard that name, but it is visible from you. You grew up in a place where strength was ordinary, not rare. Kai looked at her silently. That was too close to the truth. Sora noticed his reaction. So I am right. Almost. Then tell the truth. Kai did not answer. Because telling the truth was dangerous. If they learned about Ard, about the ancient line of warriors, about the elders who could kill a man with one finger, then they would start seeing him not as a slave, but as a possible threat of another scale. And that already meant an entirely different level of control. He was not ready yet. Sora understood that and did not press. Fine, she said. Then I will tell you my truth. Kai raised his head. I was free, she said, until I killed one of the aristocracy's mages. After that, they sold me to the arena. I have been here for 7 years, and I do not intend to die for someone's bets. He looked at her. She spoke calmly, but steel could be felt in her voice. Why are you telling me this? Sora tilted her head slightly. Because you do not intend to die beautifully either. I can see it. Less than a week passed before Kai was brought out for a new fight. This time against a mage from the upper level. His name was Elt. He controlled water and metal at the same time, and that was a rare and expensive combination. Varos summoned Kai to him in advance. Listen carefully, he said. I am listening. This fight was ordered not just for spectacle. Bets are already being placed on you from above. Too large. If you win, someone will lose money. If you lose quickly, everything will end quietly. If you lose too loudly, the public will love you even more. Kai looked at him. And why are you telling me this? Varos slowly exhaled. Because I am interested in what you will choose. I do not understand. On the arena, you can win a fight. You can win the spectator, or you can win the system. Rarely does anyone understand the difference. Kai was silent. Varos added, And if you are thinking about freedom, do not make it a dream. Make it a plan. Kai remembered those words. Because an instructor who said such things to a slave gladiator was either very smart or wanted to see him rise, and possibly both. The crowd came again, even more of them, even louder, more bets, more interest. The rumor about the Zero who did not break had already spread through the Colosseum. When Kai stepped onto the sand, Elt was already standing opposite him. tall in a shining battle mask, with 2 thin metal bracelets on his wrists. "So you are that savage?" he asked. Kai looked at him calmly. "And you are the one who is afraid of losing to an ordinary man?" The crowd roared. Elt's face changed instantly. "You talk too much. That is because you have lived too long without listening to those who are stronger than you in something other than magic." Elt released his magic at once. A stream of water struck the sand, and then thin metal needles burst out of it. Kai moved aside, but one still grazed his shoulder. He did not stop. Elt's second strike hit the ground. The sand in front of Kai became viscous, heavy like mud. It made movement difficult. Elt smiled. "Let us see how you run now." Kai did not run. He walked straight ahead, and that became a surprise even for part of the spectators. The water struck again. Kai took the blow with his shoulder. The metal tried to wrap around his legs. He tore free with a jerk, like a beast. The crowd was no longer just watching, it was roaring, because they had never seen anything like this. A mage from the upper level was struggling to keep the pace while Kai kept closing the distance. Another stream of water. Kai ducked. More needles. He caught one with his hand, broke it, and threw it back. Elt turned pale. He clearly had not expected that a man without magic could withstand so much. And then Kai crashed into him with his whole body. They fell together. Kai ended up on top and, not letting the mage raise his hands, struck him in the face several times, hard, roughly, without beautiful technique. The crowd roared so loudly that the walls trembled. Elt tried to activate the bracelets, but Kai tore one out by the root. The second too. The metal needles scattered. And then the mage understood that he had lost. Not beautifully, not elegantly. Simply. Kai rose from him and stepped back. The judge did not announce the result for a long time, waiting for a reaction from above. Then, with obvious displeasure, he raised his hand. Kai's victory. The Colosseum exploded. After the fight, he was once again not returned to the cell immediately. This time, he was taken into a dark corridor beneath the arena. 2 were already waiting there. 1 overseer. The second was a man in an expensive cloak without marks, with thin hands and a calm face. He was clearly not ordinary. The overseer said, "This is him." The man in the cloak assessed Kai with his gaze as if choosing a horse at a market. "Not bad," he said. "Very not bad." Kai was silent. "My name is Lauren," the man said. "I am responsible for special batches of gladiators." Kai looked at him. "And what do you need?" Lauren smiled. "I wanted to meet the man the entire lower floor of the Colosseum is already arguing about." "Why? Because there is a problem in you." Kai frowned. "What kind?" "You do not feel like a slave." It sounded almost like an accusation. Kai did not answer. Lauren continued. "Ordinary gladiators stopped looking at the ceiling after a month or 2. After half a year, they stopped thinking about freedom. After a year, they begin looking for benefit and service. But you," he paused, "you still look as if you are searching for a door." Kai slowly exhaled. "So what? The thing is, people like you are dangerous." Kai smirked. "Finally, honesty." Lauren smiled too. "Honesty? Good. Then I will speak even more honestly. If you continue winning the way you did today, they will either put a stronger collar on you or sell you to a private arena where fighters disappear forever." Kai looked straight at him. "Is that a threat?" "It is a warning. And why warn me?" Lauren tilted his head slightly. "Because I do not like it when good tools are broken ahead of time." Kai understood everything at once. He was not just a warden, not just an official. He was one of those who controlled the Colosseum through people and profit. And if such a man had become interested in Kai, that was already a problem. In the cell, Sora noticed his mood immediately. "What happened?" Kai sat by the wall. "Lauren noticed me." Rem whistled. "Already? That is fast." Braun frowned. "Bad." Sora came closer. He is one of those who do not like merely watching. If he noticed you, he will either sell you, break you, or use you. Kai nodded. "He said I have a problem." Rem smirked. "You have many problems." Which one did he mean exactly? That I do not feel like a slave. For a second, everyone fell silent. Then Sora said very quietly, "That means he understood the main thing." "What exactly?" She looked him in the eyes. "You do not belong here. You are just temporarily locked up." Kai remembered those words too. Because for the first time, someone in this place had directly said what he himself was only beginning to understand. The collar on his neck was not the end. It was a condition, and a condition could be changed. The next day, Varos summoned Kai again. This time he was gloomier than usual. "I have a question," the instructor said. "Ask." Have you ever seen an old man break stone with a finger? Kai blinked. Yes? Varos stared at him. What? I have. Where? At my home. Silence hung in the room. Varos slowly leaned back in his chair. So the rumors were true after all. What rumors? About the village of warrior blood? I have heard of such places. Almost none of them remain. They said their people had bodies that were tempered like weapons from childhood. Kai did not answer. Varos looked at him differently now. And you are from there? Yes? Then it is clear why the collar works poorly on you. Kai frowned. What does that mean? That your nervous system and muscle fibers were rebuilt for colossal loads from childhood. The chains of submission are designed for ordinary mages and ordinary slaves, not for those whose body can endure more than it should. Kai looked at him. So I am not just strong. Varos slowly nodded. You are one of the people who, in old times, were called the blood of the legendary warrior. Kai froze. He had heard that name only in the stories of the elders, about the founder of the line, about the ancient fighter who could break walls with his hands, about the fact that his blood still sometimes returned in distant descendants. And if that is true, Varos said quietly, then you are more dangerous than we thought. Kai slowly stood up. For whom is we? Varos looked at him for a long time. Then he said, for the Colosseum. For those who own it. For those who build a spectacle out of slaves. And here Kai finally understood. Varos was not just an instructor. He was possibly the only person in the Colosseum who saw far ahead. But it was still too early to trust him. 2 days later, a special evening fight was announced in the Colosseum. Kai's name was not spoken, but everyone already knew who would come out. They gave him a new opponent, a dark gladiator named Nair, a master of seals and pain. Even the old fighters feared him. Before the entrance, Sora stopped Kai at the door. Listen, what? Nair does not just strike, he breaks you from within. Do not let him understand that you are reacting. I will try, you will not try. You will do it. Kai looked at her. You always speak as if you already know the outcome. I simply know who can survive. It was not comfort. It was a promise. Kai stepped out onto the arena. The crowd was already roaring. And at that very moment, when he raised his gaze to the spectator rows, he suddenly noticed the silver mask above. The very same one. The man who had been watching him from the very beginning was here and looking straight down. Kai understood. Today's fight was not just another fight, it was a test. And not only of his body. Nair stepped onto the sand slowly, confidently, almost calmly. He stretched out his hands and dark symbols shimmered around his fingers. So you are that very savage? He asked. Kai clenched his fists. And you are the one who has not been beaten for too long? The crowd exploded with cries. Nair smiled thinly. Let us see how much legend there is in you. Kai did not answer. The chain on his neck trembled. And in the depths of the stands, the silver mask leaned forward slightly. The fight was beginning. And the Colosseum did not yet know that this was only the first crack in the wall that had seemed eternal. Nair did not move like an ordinary gladiator. He did not look at all like a man who relied on strength, rather like someone who had long ago understood. Pain is a language, and fear is a tool. He wore no heavy armor, only thin black wraps on his forearms and chest. Barely noticeable scars ran across his skin, and his eyes were light gray, almost colorless. There was no anger in them. That was worse. Emptiness? When the signal sounded, Nair raised his hands and immediately activated his seals. 4 dark signs flared in the air. They floated toward Kai unhurriedly, as if they already knew the outcome. Kai stepped aside, but the seals turned and followed him. The crowd gasped. Those are pursuit seals. He will not get away. That newcomer is a corpse. Kai saw that Nair was smiling very slightly, almost imperceptibly. He wanted not just to win, he wanted to break the rhythm. The first seal exploded beside Kai's leg, and he felt a blow as if a wedge had been driven into the ground beneath him. The second moved through the air and struck his shoulder with pain that cramped his arm for a moment. Kai did not stop. He walked straight toward Nair. The crowd grew even louder. Nair was surprised, barely noticeably, but surprised. He had clearly expected Kai to run, dodge, and play a magical fight. But Kai did not know those rules in the form they expected. He closed the distance and struck. Nair put up a protective seal. Kai's fist crashed into an invisible barrier. The sound was like the cracking of dry rock. The barrier trembled. Nair sharply stepped back 1 pace. Now real tension flashed in him. Sora, sitting in the gladiator's block, narrowed her eyes. He is breaking through barriers with his body. Rem beside her whistled quietly. That is not funny anymore. Nair changed tactics. Now the seals flew not at Kai, but into the sand around him. The arena began to change. The ground became viscous, heavy, as if darkness were solidifying under his feet. Every step became harder and harder for Kai. Nair raised his hand. A dark line appeared on his palm. Lie down! Kai did not understand what that meant until he felt the air above strike downward. The force was not fire and not lightning. It was compressed pain. It crashed onto his shoulders, chest, neck. The chain on his neck ignited with sharp pain, as if the collar had decided to help the opponent. Kai fell to one knee. The crowd exploded with delight. Nair slowly walked toward him. "You are strong," he said. "But here strength means nothing without rules." Kai raised his head. Blood flowed from his nose, his shoulder ached, his neck burned. But his gaze remained even. "Who said I am playing by your rules?" And in that same instant, he rushed forward. Not too beautifully, not too quickly, but so sharply that Nair did not manage to finish the seal completely. Kai crashed into him with his shoulder, then struck the ribs, then the face. Nair staggered, his seals scattered. For the first time in the fight, the crowd made a sound of real shock, because this was not according to the script. Nair stepped back, pressed his palm to his cheek, and for the first time looked at Kai not as a problem, but as a threat. "I see," he said quietly. Kai did not let him continue. He was already walking forward again. Nair suddenly changed. Now the seals became not large but small. He released them directly under Kai's steps. Each one made the body lose coordination for a fraction of a second. Small pain, constant, irritating, dangerous. It was a technique not for killing but for wearing down. Kai understood this quickly and changed his tempo. He stopped hurrying. Now he himself began walking in an arc, forcing Nair to move. He looked not at the magic but at the shoulders, the breathing, the angle of the wrist. In Ard, they would have told him, "Look at the man, not the power." And it worked. Nair was spending too much energy on maintaining control, and Kai was only getting closer. When the distance became short again, Kai made a feint. Nair reacted, and then Kai struck from below, into the body, so hard that the magical fighter's breath was knocked out. Nair recoiled. Kai did not let him go. He grabbed him by the shoulder and threw him onto the sand. The crowd was roaring without distinction now. The silver mask above did not move. Sora felt something tighten inside her. "He is doing it," she muttered. "What?" Rem asked. "He seems to be used to defeating the strongest, not with strength, but by simply not letting him breathe." Rem slowly nodded. "This is no longer a village brawl." "No," Sora said. "This is a style of survival." But Nair was not dangerous for nothing. He sharply moved aside, rising from the sand, and suddenly spoke a series of words that made dozens of black lines appear around Kai. They closed in. The ground beneath his feet became viscous. The air darkened. Kai felt how hard it became to breathe. "Now you are inside the circle of pain," Nair said quietly. "Every blow of yours will return to you. This was already serious." Usually magical techniques of this type broke ordinary slaves in seconds. Kai exhaled. Remembered Ard, the elders, the strikes against wood, the falls, the blood on his hands, and how they taught there. If you are surrounded, do not look for an exit with your eyes. Break the wall? He moved forward. Nair struck. Kai received the recoil in his chest but still came closer. Second strike, even more painful. Third. But Kai already smiled. Nair noticed it too late. Kai was not trying to win technique against technique. He did what he knew how to do best. He grabbed Nair by the arm and simply yanked him toward himself so hard that he lost his stance. And then he slammed his forehead into his face. The crowd choked with cries. The seals on the sand fell apart. Nair stepped back, no longer smiling. Blood came from his lip. He wiped it and looked at Kai with a new expression. Not fear, but no longer emptiness. "You really are not normal," he said. Kai answered hoarsely, "I have already been told that," and went on the attack again. Nair did not give up the tempo immediately. He still tried to fight, releasing seals into the air, onto the sand, to the sides. But Kai had already imposed his own rhythm. Close distance, rough contact, disruption of seals, pressure. And then the strangest thing happened. The chain of submission on Kai's neck flared with pain again. But not just like that. It reacted to the magical pressure and suddenly tried to suppress not only a possible surge of strength, but also the body. Kai suffocated for a second. Nair immediately understood the chance. He raised both hands and threw a powerful black seal at him. The crowd cried out. Kai did not manage to dodge completely. The seal struck his shoulder and part of his chest. The pain was sharp, like iron in the bone. He staggered. Nair straightened. "That is all," he said quietly. But Kai suddenly seized on the pain not as defeat, but as an anchor. He stepped forward through it, caught Nair's arm, turned his body, and struck. 1, 2nd, 3rd. Then he simply knocked him off his feet and pinned him to the sand with all his weight. Nair tried to move, but Kai was already holding him by the throat. Not to kill, to finish. The silence in the stands lasted 1 moment. Then the judge raised his hand. Kai's victory. The Colosseum roared so loudly that it seemed the walls would crack. In the stands, people stood up. Some shouted from delight, some from shock, some from excitement. The silver mask was still watching from above. And Nair, lying on the sand, stared at the sky and said very quietly, "Now they will definitely notice you." Kai, breathing heavily, did not answer. He had already understood that. After the fight, he was not returned to the cell immediately. Instead, he was led to a separate room beneath the arena, to the place where especially valuable fighters were usually kept before the owner's decision. Lauren was already waiting there. He stood by a table on which fight lists and some papers lay. "You made a beautiful mess," he said. Kai sat opposite him. "Thank you. That is not a compliment, I know." Lauren looked at him attentively. "They are starting to buy you with their eyes, Kai. Do you understand that? No. The spectator does not want just a winner. He wants a story. And you are already creating that story, so what?" Lauren came closer. "The thing is, we can make you a star. Or a problem." Kai looked straight at him. "You already said that, and I will repeat it again. There are only 3 paths out of here: become expensive, become broken, or become useful. And the 4th? Lauren smiled. "The 4th is to get out yourself. But such people almost do not exist." Kai was silent. Lauren placed a small metal token on the table. "From this fight onward, you have elevated status. You will receive a separate cage, better food, and training with the elite. But attention too, be careful. The more strongly they want to see you, the less they will allow you to be yourself." Kai took the token but did not immediately understand what exactly he felt. Because it looked like a reward, but in truth it was a new cage. Lauren was already about to leave but suddenly stopped. "And yes, Kai." "What?" "The silver mask above is not a spectator." Kai raised his head. "Then who?" Lauren looked at him with an unclear expression. "One of those who own the Colosseum. Possibly the most dangerous person here." Kai slowly clenched the token. "Why was he watching me?" Lauren shrugged. "Because now you are interesting to him." And left. Kai remained alone, with a very bad understanding that everything was becoming much more complicated. In the elite chamber, they gave him a new place. Not a cage anymore, a room. Small, stone with a narrow window and an iron door. Still a slave prison, but already another level. There he met Sora, Rem, and Braun again. Rem immediately smirked. "Well then, now you are officially unpleasant to the system." Kai sat on the bunk. "Thank you?" "Not thank you," Rem repeated. "It is a statement." Sora came closer. "Did you see the silver mask?" Kai nodded. "Lauren said it was one of the owners." Sora frowned. "Then everything is more serious than I thought." Braun was silent longer than everyone, then asked, "Do you want freedom?" Kai did not answer immediately. It was not a simple question. Because freedom here was not an abstract dream. It was something one could die for, and something that almost no one here had already seen alive. "Yes," he finally said. Braun nodded. "Then remember, the Colosseum is not broken head-on." Kai looked at him. "Then how?" Braun slowly raised his eyes. "First, you find what it stands on." Those words remained hanging in the cell like a knife. Late at night, Sora approached Kai again. "I thought," she said, "that your strength might simply be rare physical training. But after the fight with Nair..." "No, what no?" "You have something greater. Not magic, not an ordinary school. Something hereditary." Kai was silent. Sora continued. "Are you from a warrior clan?" He looked aside. She had already guessed enough as it was. Yes, her gaze did not change. It only became more attentive. "And this place will not break you. Why are you so sure? Because I saw how you react to pressure. You do not crumble, you become denser." It was a strange but precise description. Kai smirked. "Beautifully said. I can be beautiful when I want." He looked at her, and then very calmly asked, Have you ever thought about escape? Sora was silent for a long time, then quietly answered, every day. That was all he wanted to hear. The next day, preparations began in the Colosseum for a grand evening celebration. And that meant one thing. Soon there would be new fights, new bets, and a new chance for the leadership to use Kai as a showcase. Varos summoned him for a short training session. You are in another layer now, he said. I understand. No, you do not. Below they beat you for pleasure. Now they will preserve you for profit. That is more frightening. Kai looked at the instructor. Are you helping me? Varos was silent for a long time. I only help those who may one day change the order. That was almost a confession, but Kai did not press. Varos threw him a wooden sword. Show what you can do. Kai took the weapon, but almost immediately understood that the sword was not his form. He held it for a few seconds, then simply threw it aside. Varos narrowed his eyes. Why? Because I do not want to pretend to be what I am not. And who are you? Kai looked straight ahead. A man who has been held by a chain for too long. Varos slowly nodded. Better already. He turned, preparing to leave, but at the threshold suddenly said, Do not look for an exit. Look for the weak point of the system. Kai did not answer. But he understood that this was not just advice, it was direction. That evening he saw the silver mask again, this time closer, not above but in the side gallery, almost opposite the elite fighters' cells. Kai stood behind the bars and watched. The mask watched him too. There was too much stone and too much power between them. But Kai still felt that this was no coincidence. The man in the mask raised his hand and made a barely noticeable gesture. And immediately after that, Lauren approached him. Tomorrow you will have a new fight, he said. Against whom? Lauren looked at him and for the first time did not smile. Against someone who will force you to show more than just strength? Kai slowly frowned. Who is it? Lauren answered quietly. One of the senior champions of the Colosseum. Name? Lauren held his gaze. Raven. Sora, standing farther away, changed slightly in the face. Kai noticed it. Do you know him? She nodded. And you will not like him. Kai looked at her, and then again at the closed door, at the chain on his neck, and at the dark line beneath the stone that could lead to anything. Ahead was a new fight, and no longer just for survival, but to understand exactly how the Colosseum breaks. At night, when the arena had already gone quiet, the man in the silver mask stood in the upper room and looked at papers. On one sheet was written Kai, 0, potential high, resistance anomalous, origin unknown, connection to ancient power likely. The man ran his finger along the last line, then quietly said, So the blood is still alive. A voice came from the darkness behind him. What do you command? The silver mask did not move. Let him come out tomorrow. I want to see how dangerous he truly is. And the candles in the room trembled from the passing wind. Below, beneath the Colosseum, a slave gladiator slept. But the chain on his neck was already beginning to understand that it was holding the wrong one. Raven was the senior champion of the Colosseum, not because he was the strongest. There were enough strong people here. He was senior because he knew how to kill in such a way that people wanted to watch again. It was a separate talent to make the spectator not simply frightened, but admiring. Raven fought with cold precision. His magic worked like a blade, short, clean, without unnecessary gestures. When Kai first saw him in the training yard, he understood immediately. This was not a man of frenzy like Thunder, and not a dark puppeteer like Nair. Raven was worse. He was economical. In life and in battle, economical people are the most dangerous of all. Tall, with black hair slicked back, in light armor with metal plates on the shoulders, he looked at Kai without contempt. That was even more unpleasant than contempt. So you are that very savage, he said. Kai did not answer. Varro stood aside and silently watched. Raven smirked barely noticeably. Silent. That means either smarter than you look, or simply do not understand who stands before you. And who are you? Kai asked calmly. Raven raised an eyebrow slightly. Good question. I am the one who has not lost on the arena for 4 years. Sora, sitting by the wall, snorted quietly. That means they have not given you a truly difficult opponent, she muttered. Raven heard, turned his head. And you then are that very aunt with ulcers instead of a tongue. Sora did not even blink. And you then are another face that has not been beaten for too long. Kai smirked slightly. Raven noticed it, and immediately understood. The new slave was not one of those who could be easily offended by words. Varos raised his hand. Assessment fight. No killing, no magical acceleration to the limit, only on my signal. Raven nodded. As you say. Kai clenched his fists, and the fight began. Raven moved as if he already knew where Kai would step. Not faster, not stronger, precisely more accurately. His first strike landed on Kai's shoulder not as an attack, but as a cut of direction. The second to the wrist, the third to the body. Each blow was calculated to break rhythm, not bones. Kai tried to close in, but Raven moved aside and slashed magic across the floor. Stone dust rose in a cloud. Kai blinked and already received a blow under the ribs. The crowd of gladiators in the distant stands of the training yard began to murmur. Raven is reading him, he is just a newcomer. No, look, this Zero is not falling. Kai truly was not falling. He caught blows with his shoulders, elbows, forearms, sometimes let them through, but each time continued moving forward. Raven began to frown. Because he understood the main thing, Kai was not trying to win beautifully. He was trying to shorten the distance to where Raven's technique would become less advantageous. Raven immediately changed his style. Now he began using short magical shifts, pushes of air and stone that knocked off balance. These were not powerful blows, but traps. Kai was caught by the second of them. His leg moved slightly back. Raven instantly struck him in the chest. Kai flew back and slid across the sand. The silence around became sharper. Sora tensed. Rem stopped smirking. Braun narrowed his eyes. Raven came closer and leaned down. You rely too much on being able to reach and strike. But here, sometimes you need to think. Kai stood up, wiped blood from his lip, and calmly answered, I am thinking, and rushed forward again. Raven's expression truly changed for the first time. He had expected stubbornness, but not such tempo. Kai was not a brainless beast. After several strikes, he began reading Raven's movements, just as he had earlier read Nair. He looked not at the magic, but at the shoulder, the wrist, the breathing, the turn of the body, and gradually began finding gaps. Raven understood this too late. Kai shortened the distance, struck from below into the body, then immediately along the inner side of the knee. Raven lost stability for an instant. That instant was enough. Kai slammed his shoulder into his chest and almost knocked him off his feet. Raven stepped back. The crowd began to murmur louder now. He reached him. The Zero reached Raven. That cannot be. Raven straightened and slowly ran his hand over his chest. Interesting. He was not angry. That made him even more dangerous. You change right in the middle of the fight, Raven said. That means you have a military habit. Or a village one. Kai did not answer. Raven smiled coldly. Then I will show you how a real arena differs from a fight on a trail. He raised his hand, and small stone rings began to flare around Kai. One, a second, a third. Not deadly, restricting. They squeezed the space, forcing movements to become awkward, heavy, straight. Kai understood immediately. This was not a technique for damage, it was a technique for control. And control on the arena was always more dangerous than damage. Kai rushed to the side, but the rings rearranged themselves. He tried to break one with his fist and only knocked his hand back with pain. Raven, meanwhile, walked calmly, like a man who had already calculated the outcome. You see, he said, you are strong, very strong. But you do not know how to fight against someone who changes the field around you. Kai looked at him from the center of the shrinking circle. And then, for the first time in the entire fight, not a strike but a thought surfaced in his head. He did not need to break the rings, he needed to break the one who held them. Kai stopped fighting the surroundings, he froze. Raven noticed it and narrowed his eyes. What? Kai sharply inhaled and did what no one expected. He did not retreat. He took a step forward straight into the most uncomfortable space. Raven thought he had made a mistake, but Kai used the very moment of pressure as support. Crouching down, he struck not the defense, but the ground under Raven's feet. Sand and stone dust flew up. Raven lost sight for a fraction of a second. Kai was already beside him. A strike to the body, a strike to the throat, not strong, but enough to knock the breath away. Arm grab, turn, and a hip throw. Raven hit the sand heavily. The crowd gasped. Sora in the block said quietly, "Now that is already scarier." Rem looked at her. Why? Because he is not just surviving, he is adapting. Raven did not get up immediately, and when he did, for the first time, a shadow of real irritation appeared on his face. "You are dangerous," he said. Kai answered calmly, "I simply do not like losing." Raven smirked. "Then let us see how much you dislike it." Raven removed the stone rings. And that was a mistake Kai did not notice immediately. Because instead of control, Raven chose shadow. It darkened around him. Not sharply, not theatrically, simply as if the light above the yard had become denser and colder. Thin blades emerged from the shadow beneath his feet, almost invisible. Kai stepped back and received a cut along his side. Immediately a second, then a third. The spectators screamed louder. Sora narrowed her eyes. He plays dirtier than I thought. Rem smirked without joy. This is the Colosseum. Raven moved the shadow like a weapon. It was not an illusion, but living magical matter clinging to the sand and air. A very expensive school, a very rare one. Kai understood. This was already a level that could not be taken immediately with raw strength. But he went forward anyway. Because in art he had been taught the main thing. If pain is inevitable, do not make it the meaning. He broke through 2 more blades, grabbed Raven by the arm, and yanked him toward himself. Raven put up a magical defense. Kai struck it with his forehead. The defense cracked. Raven was forced to step back, and at that moment his shadow detached from his feet for an instant. Kai saw it, and understood where the weakness was, not in the magic, in the rhythm. The shadow followed the movement. If the tempo is broken, the magic loses precision. Kai began fighting even more roughly, sharper, seemingly more random but more precise in meaning. He forced Raven to change trajectories, adjust, make mistakes. And after a few seconds, Raven himself began breathing more heavily. The crowd did not understand what was happening, but they felt it. The fight had stopped being one-sided. And then something happened that rarely happens in the Colosseum. The crowd began rooting for Kai not only because of his strength, but because he was alive. Most gladiators seemed to the spectators either too beautiful or too magical or too distant. Kai fought as if he had come straight from stone and blood, from a land where fighting was not a game and not a show. He did not pose. He did not smile for the audience. He did not play at being a legend. He simply did not fall. And spectators very quickly love those who do not let themselves be broken. Come on, Zero, break him, more. Raven heard this and changed for the first time, not outwardly, but inwardly, because he understood. The hall was beginning to accept Kai, and that was dangerous for the Colosseum. A favorite of the crowd is always a future problem for the owners. Raven sharply accelerated, wanting to finish the fight before the noise got out of control. He sent the shadow through the air and tried to close it around Kai's neck. Kai saw the movement at the last instant and managed to move aside, but the chain of submission on his neck exploded with pain again. He staggered. Raven struck immediately. Kai took a blow to the jaw, then to the chest, then another, and flew onto the sand. The crowd roared. Raven stood over him and breathed heavily. That is it. Enough. Kai slowly rose on one elbow. Blood flowed from his lip. There was anger in his eyes, but cold anger. Raven was already about to come closer and finish it. And then Kai made the most dangerous move of the entire fight. He did not retreat. He smiled. Just slightly. Raven froze because it meant one thing. Kai had understood something. Kai slowly stood up and asked, "Do you always decide so quickly when a fight is over?" Raven frowned. "What? You like control. That means it is hard for you when an opponent is not afraid to lose face." Raven narrowed his eyes. Kai stepped forward. "You are not used to fighting someone who comes at you without fear. You are used to those who play by the rules of the arena." Raven understood what he was getting at too late. Kai had already rushed forward, not like before, not head-on. He made a false step, dropped low, and slammed his shoulder hard into Raven's knee. Raven lost his balance. Kai immediately caught him by the neck and, using his entire body weight, threw him backward. Raven fell. At that moment, Kai pinned him to the sand. The crowd exploded with cries. The judge was already raising his hand but stopped. Raven tried to break free. The shadow twitched around him, but Kai held him too tightly. He did not strike. He simply held him, and that was enough. Because on the arena, victory is not necessarily killing. Sometimes it is simply the inability to continue. The judge raised his hand. Victory, Kai's. The Colosseum exploded. Raven rose slowly. He looked at Kai for a very long time, without anger, without hatred, with some new interest. Then he held out his hand. Kai did not understand immediately, but still shook it. Raven nodded briefly. "You are not just strong, you are inconvenient." Kai answered, "I have already been told that." Raven smirked. "Now they will say it more often." He left the arena not like a loser, but like a man who had already drawn a conclusion, and that was more alarming than any threat. After the fight, Varus looked truly pleased for the first time. Not joyful, precisely pleased. "Not bad," he said. Kai wiped blood from his chin. Not bad. For someone who was a 0 not long ago. Kai looked at him. Did you expect me to win? Varos shrugged. I expected you not to give up. That is almost the same thing. No, not the same thing. For the Colosseum, almost. They stood in silence. Then Varos said more seriously, Now listen carefully. Your victory over Raven did not end anything. It simply shifted the scales. In whose favor? Varos looked at him. For now, yours, but not for long. Why? Because the owner of the arena has already seen you more than once. And now he will decide what to do with you next. Kai remembered the silver mask. Who is he? Varos held his gaze. If I tell you, there will be no road back. Kai did not step back. And is there one anyway? Silence. Then Varos slowly said, His name is Sevran. Kai did not blink, but something inside him shifted, because that name was clearly one of those spoken more quietly than the others. Is he one of the owners of the Colosseum? Kai asked. Not just one of the owners, the main one among those who hold the contract networks. If he becomes seriously interested in you, you will either be raised very high or hidden very deep. And why does he need me? Varos looked straight at him. Because you have the body of an ancient power, and because you have already begun shaking his arena. That evening, Sora found Kai by the wall of the inner courtyard. He was sitting against the stone and silent. You are not happy, she said. Should I be? After victory over Raven? Yes. Kai looked at her. It is only one victory. In the Colosseum, one victory often costs 5 lives. He nodded, then quietly asked, Do you know Sevran? Sora immediately tensed. Yes. Who is he? She was silent for a while, then sat beside him. A man who does not like it when the arena begins to love the wrong people. Kai looked at her. What does that mean? Sora answered honestly. It means he knows how to use people like smoke. While the fire is visible, all attention is there. And the real work is done in the shadows. Kai shifted his gaze to the sand. And what would you advise? Sora was silent for a long time. Then said, Do not become convenient. He looked at her. She continued. They will try to make you convenient for the spectators, for the bets, for the upper floors. If you become convenient, you have lost. As long as you are inconvenient, you are alive. Kai remembered those words, because that was perhaps the most honest instruction in the Colosseum. At night, he was led into a separate corridor, not for punishment, not for reward, for a meeting. He understood it immediately. The corridor led to an upper hall where ordinary slaves were not allowed. The doors opened, and he saw him. Sevran stood by the window, dressed in a long, dark cloak. On his face was a silver mask without emotion, only narrow slits for the eyes. The room was quiet, even too quiet. Kai stopped. Sevran turned. Come closer. The voice was calm, but there was the habit of command in it. Kai did not move. Sevran tilted his head slightly. Interesting. You are not afraid of me? I do not know whom to fear, Kai answered. Sevran slowly came closer. A smart answer. Kai looked straight at the mask. Why am I here? Because you have already attracted the arena's attention. And mine as well. And what comes next? Sevran turned slightly toward the window. Next, you will take part in a closed fight. Kai frowned. Against whom? Against someone none of the spectators will see. Kai fell silent. Sevran continued. If you win, you will receive a new status. If you lose, you will disappear. It sounded like a sentence. Calm, businesslike, emotionless. Kai looked at him for a very long time. Why do you think I will agree? Sevran turned around. Because you want freedom. And I am offering you a step toward it. It is a trap. Of course. Kai clenched his teeth. Sevran spoke as if he were doing nothing wrong. And that was the vilest thing. What kind of fight? Kai asked. Sevran held his gaze. Tomorrow you will see for yourself. When he was returned to the cell, Sora immediately saw from his face that something serious had happened. What did he say? Kai sat on the bunk. A closed fight tomorrow. Sora turned slightly pale. Against whom? He did not say. Rem snorted. Then it is against someone very bad. Bronze slowly raised his head. Or very valuable. Kai looked at all of them. And at that moment he understood. Now the Colosseum would begin revealing its true layers. Victory over Raven was not the end, but the first cracked stone. Something greater was hidden beneath the sand of the arena. Sevran had already understood that Kai was dangerous. And now he was going to test him not as a fighter, but as a problem. Kai lay on his back and stared at the ceiling. The chain on his neck was cold. but it no longer seemed eternal. Somewhere deep beneath the Colosseum, movement was beginning. The upper owners had started playing, and Kai was only beginning to understand exactly how to answer them. And for the first time, he thought not about survival, but about how one day to force the entire Colosseum to collapse under its own weight. There was no audience in the closed fight. It was the strangest and most dangerous thing Kai had seen in the Colosseum all this time. No shouting, no bets, no stands choking on blood and spectacle. Only a stone hall beneath the lower floors of the arena, several magical lamps, and a round platform in the center covered with fresh sand. Suppression runes on the walls, magical grates on the ceiling. Silent guards in dark cloaks stood by the doors. Severin stood by the far wall like a man who had already decided everything. "You came," he said. Kai did not answer. Beside him stood Sora, Braun, and Varos. They had been brought not as support, but as observers. Severin looked at them. "These three know that you are not an ordinary slave?" "They know enough," Varos said. Severin nodded, then shifted his gaze to Kai. "The conditions are simple. The opponent will be chosen by me. The fight is without spectators. Victory, and you receive the right to a new status. Defeat." He made a short pause. "You disappear." Kai looked at him calmly. "Why are you here yourself?" Severin tilted his head slightly. "Because this concerns me personally. Those words were a bad sign." Sora tensed. Braun clenched his fingers. Varos frowned. And Kai felt for the first time that this was not only about strength. Something was being hidden here. Severin raised his hand. "Bring him in." The door in the opposite wall opened, and from the darkness came a man in massive chains. Kai did not recognize him immediately. Then it hit him like a blow. It was a gladiator he had seen among the seniors. Tall, broad-shouldered, with cloudy eyes as if part of his consciousness had not belonged to him for a long time. There was a collar on his neck too, but not like the others. Heavier, wider, with black inserts. Sora clenched her teeth. "No," Braun slowly exhaled. "It is a transitional." Kai frowned. "What does that mean?" Varos answered quietly. "It is someone who has already been broken once." The transitional walked like a machine, without emotions, without malice, without fear. Around his arms ran dark blue lines, similar to cords of magic, but rougher. Kai immediately understood that before him stood not just a strong gladiator. This was someone whom the Colosseum kept on the border between man and tool. Severin said, "His name is Dorn. He was a champion before he stopped being convenient." Kai shifted his gaze to him. "And you want him to kill me? I want to test what you are when you have no crowd and no bets." Dorn did not speak. He only looked with empty eyes. Severin lowered his hand. "Begin." Dorn moved first. Not quickly, heavily, like a walking wall. Kai dodged, but felt the blow of air from the movement. Dorn struck the sand with his palm, and a wave of stone dust rose from the ground. Kai jumped back. Dorn followed. Every step left cracks in the sand. Kai understood. This was not an ordinary gladiator. This was a man whose body had already been rewritten for battle. Kai attacked first. A strike to the shoulder, a strike to the body, another one. Dorn did not even flinch. He raised his hand and struck Kai in the chest with such force that he was thrown onto the sand. Kai rolled, got up, but had already felt it. Everything was different here. Dorn was not just stronger. He did not feel pain the way an ordinary person did. Transitional status was not a random word. It was someone between a slave and a combat shell. Sora, off to the side, turned pale. "They are using him again." Braun lowered his head. "Yes." Varos watched without moving. Kai rushed forward again, but Dorn intercepted his hand and squeezed it so hard that the joints cracked. Kai gritted his teeth. Dorn leaned in and spoke for the first time. His voice was dull, as if from underwater. "Leave." It was so unexpected that Kai froze. "What?" Dorn repeated, barely distinguishably. "Leave. While you can." Then Severin in the distance raised his hand, and Dorn changed again. Something human left his eyes. A program came in its place. He sharply threw Kai aside and struck the ground with a magical wave. Kai barely managed to move away. A blow to the ribs, pain, sand in the eyes. And at that moment, Kai understood the most terrible thing. Dorn did not want to kill him. He was being forced. Kai rose to one knee and looked at Severin. "You made a weapon out of him." Severin did not deny it. He was useful while he resisted. Then he began asking questions. Now he is convenient. Kai felt rage rising inside. but not blind. Cold. And what is beneath the arena? He asked sharply. Severin slightly narrowed his eyes. You asked dangerous questions too quickly. That means I hit the mark. Severin was silent for a second. Then he said shortly, beneath the Colosseum lies an old framework, an ancient foundation. No one cares about it. But Kai had already seen his gaze shift aside and understood. A lie. There was something important beneath the arena, very important. And that was exactly why Severin was here. Not only for money, not only for the show, not only for slaves. Sora noticed it too. He is lying, she whispered. Braun answered quietly. Of course he is lying. Varos clenched his fists, but if he is here, then the old foundation really does exist. I had almost stopped hearing the outside sounds. Because Dorn was coming at him again. Now Kai stopped striking the body. He struck the joints, the support points, the pain lines. Because against such an opponent, you could not work with strength head-on. Dorn withstood the blows, but his rhythm was still human. Not his own imposed, but human. And Kai began to see it. He moved aside, forced Dorn to turn, slow down, repeat the same movement. He was still monstrously dangerous. One blow and Kai would have been on the floor with a broken rib. But Kai was no longer trying simply to survive. He was trying to understand. And at some moment, Dorn froze. Just for an instant. Kai saw it and rushed forward, striking him in the neck from the side. Not fatally, but enough to break the line of control. Dorn staggered. Something alive flashed in his eyes and immediately disappeared. Severin sharply tensed. Enough. But Kai had already felt that he did not want the fight to end. Not now. He wanted to test not Dorn, to test Kai. Kai looked at his opponent again and said loudly so that everyone could hear, You are still inside, right? Dorn froze. Sora by the wall gasped. Varos narrowed his eyes. Even Severin did not react immediately. Kai stepped closer. You are still there. Otherwise you would not have told me to leave. For a second, Dorn's face twitched, and that was enough. Because Kai understood he was not completely broken. Not finally. Severin sharply raised his hand. End. But it was too late. Kai had already slammed into Dorn with his shoulder and, using his own weight, knocked him off his feet. The fall came out loud. Sand rose up. The grates trembled. Severin clenched his fingers. 1 second, 2. Then he quietly said, Good, and lowered his hand. The fate of the fight was decided. Kai did not finish Dorn off. He simply stood above him. Dorn lay there, breathing heavily, and something human flashed in his eyes again. And then Severin smiled beneath the mask. It was the worst sign of all. Severin announced, Kai passes. No one understood at first what that meant. Then he added new status, special fighter, access to the upper levels, and access to the lower archive of the arena. At that, everyone tensed. Sora sharply stepped forward. What? Severin looked at her. You heard. Braun frowned. Why do you need that? Severin answered calmly. Because he is interesting. And that is all? Varos asked. That is enough. Kai looked at him and already understood. This was not a reward. This was a move. Severin wanted to keep him closer, wanted to understand how dangerous he was, and possibly use him. But the lower archive, that was already serious. Because archive meant information, and information in the Colosseum was more valuable than gold. When they were being led out of the hall, Sora walked beside Kai and whispered, Do not trust him. I was not planning to. No, not like that. Do not trust him at all. He does not give access for no reason. Kai nodded. I understand. Nearby, Varos said quietly without looking at them. And now the most interesting part is only beginning. The entrance to the lower archive was hidden under the technical corridors of the Colosseum. Even senior overseers were rarely allowed there. Lauren opened the door personally, calm, polite, as always. Congratulations, he said to Kai. Now you are officially too useful to be left below. Is that bad? Kai asked. Lauren smiled. Probably for you. They descended downward. The deeper they went, the older the walls became. There was no longer the usual decoration of the Colosseum there. The stone was rough, ancient, sometimes carved with such old runes that Kai did not recognize them. Sora noticed it first. This is not part of the arena. Lauren did not answer. That in itself was an answer. The lower archive turned out to be a huge hall with rows of shelves, stone boxes, sealed chests, and scrolls. Not only documents of fights were stored here, there were histories of slaves, lists of fighters, Old contracts, drawings of underground passages, magical schemes, and something else Lauren clearly did not want to show. Kai looked at all this and felt, beneath the Colosseum lay not just an archive, it was the heart of the system. Veros ran his hand along one of the shelves. Old records of slave batches, fights, and lists of those transferred to closed sectors are stored here. Kai frowned. Closed sectors? Lauren, standing a little farther away, answered, "Those whom you will not see on the arena." Sora sharply turned to him. "What do you mean we will not see?" Lauren looked at her calmly. "Exactly that." Kai understood immediately there was something more terrible here than ordinary slavery. That was why he began searching not for fight lists, but transfer lists. He found them quickly. Too quickly. The records were neatly hidden in a distant chest under a magical seal. Kai noticed a mismatch in the coding, pulled out the needed tablet, and saw a list of names. Almost all without clans, gladiators, workers, the broken, transferred to the lower sectors. And among them, one name made him freeze. Dorn. Braun beside him sharply tensed. Sora looked at him without breathing. "What is this?" Kai asked. Braun answered first. "This is a list of those sent to the processing center." "What center?" He pointed lower. There, on the old scheme, a node beneath the Colosseum was marked. Deeper than the main foundation, old corridors. Sealed chambers, a place marked as core. Sora turned pale. They are still using the core. Lauren sharply stepped forward. "Close the book." Kai raised his head. "What is this?" Lauren was not smiling for the first time in all that time. Something you were not supposed to learn. The room became very quiet. Veros slowly exhaled. Kai understood. Now he would either get the truth or a new lie would begin. He did not close the book. "Speak!" Lauren looked at him coldly. Beneath the Colosseum there is an ancient structure. It is older than the arena itself. The suppression of the collars, control over the sector, old seals, and part of the city's magical infrastructure depend on it. Kai frowned. And if someone damages it, the Colosseum could become a grave for everyone. Sora said sharply, "You are lying." Lauren looked at her without emotion. "I am leaving things unsaid. Those are different things." Kai slowly closed the book. But he had already understood the main thing. Below lay not just a foundation. There was the system on which everything rested. And if one reached it, one could either destroy the Colosseum or seize it. When they were leaving the archive, Kai saw Dorn again. Not in a cage, not on the sand. In the corridor with guards. He walked slowly, head lowered, as if he had lost himself again. Kai stopped. Dorn raised his eyes, and this time there was already more light in his gaze. Less. But it was there. He said quietly, "Do not stand here." Kai did not move. "What did they do to you?" Dorn exhaled with difficulty. "I was too close to the core." Lauren sharply tensed. Enough. But Kai had already understood that Dorn was not speaking by accident. He was warning him. "Is the core real?" Kai asked. Dorn nodded slightly, very weakly, under the arena. "There is a heart." The guards sharply grabbed him by the shoulders. Lauren instantly said, "Take him away." But Dorn managed to look at Kai once more and whisper almost soundlessly, "Do not let them. Wake it." After that, he was dragged away. Kai stood motionless. Sora whispered beside him, "He remembers." Kai slowly nodded, and now everything became much worse. Late at night, Kai did not sleep. He thought about Dorn, about the core, about the lists, about Sevron, about the fact that the Colosseum rested not only on slaves and spectators. It rested on something ancient, on something hidden beneath sand and blood. And if that heart awakened, the Colosseum would change forever. Sora sat in the shadow by the wall. "Are you not sleeping either?" he asked. "No, thinking about the core?" "Yes, and what do you think?" She was silent for a long time, then answered, "That this place is much older than they tell us, and that Sevron knows more than he shows." Kai looked at the ceiling, so I was right. "About what?" "The Colosseum must not be broken from the stands." Sora quietly smirked. "Then from where?" Kai turned his head toward the darkness beneath the floor. "From within." And at that moment, somewhere far below, beneath the stone, beneath the sand, and beneath old magic, something very weak but clearly alive responded to his thought. Kai felt it. Sora also noticed how his face changed. "What?" He looked at the floor. There, something is there. And far beneath the arena, in the deepest part of the Colosseum, the heart of the system responded for the first time in very many years to the presence of a man whom the chain still considered a slave.